Hello again and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in this week. Before I get into some interesting early September statistics, I want to talk about the interest rate cuts and how prices were supposed to skyrocket. I've had people debate with me, both the general public and industry professionals, about how, it's just going to skyrocket. Prices are going to take off. We've seen 3 rate cuts in almost 4 months since this has happened, and prices haven't taken off. Now, I did mention previously in the year, interest rates on fixed mortgages have actually been coming down for almost a year since around October last year. They were over 6%, remember? Now you can get something 4%. So interest rates have been dropping for a year. And so that narrative I knew was BS in the beginning, but now we're seeing the reality. Once the cuts happened, nothing happened to the market. Actually, prices declined like they usually do in the summer. And of course, now we're having a seasonal uptick in September. Now, even the Bank of Canada isn't seeming too optimistic about the housing market. This was sent to me by a friend, this post. The Bank of Canada is literally telling you housing is going to crash. And of course, they underline a recent article from the Bank of Canada. I'm going to get into it right here. So the same article, here it is, the actual official page from the Bank of Canada, September 20th, indicators of financial vulnerabilities. And of course, in this article, they go through Canadian debt and all sorts of things. Here's the debt service ratio, greater than 25%. You have 35% of all new mortgages are greater than 25% debt service ratio. So more than 25% of their income goes towards servicing a mortgage, for new mortgages, that is. Now, that's in addition to all their other debts. Here we have that same chart broken down into subcategories. You have investors, repeat home buyers, and first-time buyers. Of course, they're all now servicing more mortgage debt than they used to be prior to, they go back to 2014 in this chart. You see first-time buyers, 50% of them are now more than 25% of their income goes towards the mortgage payment. Again, just mortgage payments, not student debt, not car loans, none of that, just mortgage debt. Now on to the part where they mention the housing correction. Here it is, indicators related to high house prices. House prices have climbed considerably since the start of the global pandemic. Expectations of future price increases and strengthened investor demand likely contributed to this rise, aka the speculators. A large misalignment of house prices relative to longer-term market drivers could lead to an abrupt price correction in the future. Such a correction can, in turn, bring on financial stress for households because housing often represents their largest asset. So the Bank of Canada is clearly concerned about a housing correction, and they refer to it as an abrupt correction. So it's just going to happen suddenly, which is pretty insane. Again, not unexpected if you follow this channel, but at least they're calling it out now. Moving on to a big indicator here, the yield curve. And you might have seen this talked about from other people recently, but the yield curve has uninverted. It's been inverted since July or so, 2022, mid 2022, and it just uninverted this week. And of course, what does that mean? This is a major signal for recession. I think it's like 9 times or 8 times out of 10, we have a recession shortly thereafter within months of this uninverting. So big indicator there. Now I'm going to get into some preliminary stats for September from the GTA and surrounding areas, just to show you how the market is barely hanging on at this point. Let's start with the number of new listings and the number of sales. And here's a chart showing both. This is from the Toronto Real Estate Board, 70,000 members, the biggest real estate board in Canada. Now I'm going to show you the sales to new listings ratio in relation to this data here. Starting off in January at 46%. And if you remember, prices in the GTA and the Toronto Real Estate Board, where this data is from, they increased for the first few months of the year. The other area that I'm going to show you in a bit was later on, but you can see that rise in the sale to new listings ratio, meaning it's getting further into sellers' territory. And then since May, 38%, June, 35%, July, 34%, that's in a buyer's market. And of course, prices did decline. August did okay at 39%, just outside a balanced market, still in the buyer's market. But look at September. Now, this number will increase a bit because the sale reporting lags behind just a little bit, but it's still one of the lowest months of the year. Right now, it's at 25%. This is as of September 24th. So 1 week to go, and we're at 25% deep into buyer's market. Now, we did see a seasonal uptick in the prices. But if people had known that they had the bargaining power, the buyers, I'm sure they would have negotiated a little bit harder on these prices. Now, here's the prices. And this is the average close price for all residential areas in the GTA or in the Toronto Real Estate Board and Prop TX, I'm going to call it from now on. I'm going to call it both, actually. And in September, you can see the price has risen just over 30,000 for the average price. In January this year, it was 884. Of course, it goes up and down with the seasons. And June being the peak with reaching almost $1 million then. Now moving on to the close price to the original list price. This is what homes are selling for in relation to their listing price. So in January, this year over last year was 97.2%, so higher than last year. Very similar though, not that far off. This year in February was higher also. March, same thing, a few points higher. But then when you get to April, it shows the market starting to soften here. In April, it was higher last year than this year. Same with May, June, same thing. It was 100%. The market was hot last spring in comparison to now. 84% this June compared with 100% of list price last June. And of course, the rest of the months are lower than 2023. So this year started off stronger than last year, but it's ending weaker. Now moving on to days to sell. How long is your house going to sit on the market on average? These are only places that have sold, obviously. And this year, it's 20 to 30% longer for your house to sell than it was last year. So a big indicator that this market is continuing to soften. Now moving on to the number of expired listings. So this, again, is a representation of all those homes that aren't selling. They expire. Many of them or most of them will get relisted. But every month is higher, significantly higher than last year. Now take a look at September this year. We're at 31,521 expired listings, and this is as of the 24th. Last September included the whole month, so that's the full 30 days. So we are significantly higher with expired listings this year, and this is because the market is barely hanging on. I'm going to get into the same stats in just a second from the ITSO area, but first I want to show you the distribution of the realtors. So in Prop TX or TREB, their system, they have approximately 46% of the realtors in Canada. TREB has 70,000 members approximately, plus there's more on the Prop TX system. So it's about 75 to 80,000. So we'll say 75. It's about 46% of all agents in Canada. The rest is 54%, obviously. Now I'm going to compare that to the MLS sales distribution for August. So the 46% of the agents in Canada that are on this system sold 22% of the listings in Canada. So that's a big difference in the representation of sales per agent. Of course, the Toronto Real Estate Board and Toronto area, GTA, and Ontario in general is leading this market right now, and it's leading the slowdown in the market. Now the same data from ITSO, this is about 12 to 15 boards. They're changing. I can't even remember how many there are anymore, but this is Niagara Association, Hamilton, a bunch of other places that are included, lots of agents included here. And here's the same data, the sales, the number of sales and the number of new listings. So let's look at the sales to new listings ratio. And as we saw on the other chart, it did increase from January into February, slowed down a little bit into March, but it looks a little healthier than the Toronto data does until you get to September. The Toronto Real Estate Board was at 25. ITSO is at 33%, far lower than any other month this year. Average price is seeing its seasonal uptick at $815,000, up from $788 from August. Now looking at the close price to original list price for this area, you can see, just like the Toronto Real Estate Board, this year started off a little bit better than 2023, but the last few months have been lower. So people are negotiating more. According to this data, you should be able to negotiate approximately 3% off the average house out there right now. So use your negotiating tools, get your agent to negotiate. I just negotiated 6% off a house. If my buyers are watching, you know who you are. So just using that 3% average on a $500,000 starter home, it's sad to say that's a starter home these days, you should be able to negotiate at least $15,000 off that price of the average house. Maybe more, depends on how desperate that seller is. And the average days to sell for this region, all months this year are significantly higher than they were last year. Again, 20 to 30% longer to sell your house this year compared to last year. And the number of expired listings shows every month, but except for May, which is very close, has significantly more expired listings this year. And again, September, not even over, still a week left, and we're already higher than the whole month of September last year. So I think it's pretty hard to argue that the market isn't softening at this point. Year over year, we're seeing all this data just compile. It's getting worse or better depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on, but it is slowing definitely. Let me know what you think. Are you seeing things slow down in your area, or do you have a place listed? Are you trying to buy a place and noticing any changes in the market near you? Until next week, I'll see you then.